guys, Mackay here with Ironside Ranch, and I want to talk a little bit today about Goat 101. I'm sorry it's been a while since we've done a video. We had some issues come up just trying to get our property ready, and kind of took most of our time, and it's a significant time commitment just going out there anyways. But also then I came down with strep throat, so I was out of commission for a couple days. But anyways, we want to talk about some goat basics. We did the last video. This is kind of what we've learned since then. So number one, food. So the food for our goats, there's a lot of people out there, they do different things. They put their goats on pasture, they feed them grain. We elected to use a browse method to where we basically rotate them around. They're allowed to pick and choose kind of what they naturally want to eat. And what we've found is that our goats like to eat our shirts. Hey, buddy. Anyways, they naturally will go after the leafier greens, and they browse through the vegetables. But the last thing they really want, hey Daisy, let's leave that alone. Sorry, she's hitting the camera. So we've they want to go after these leafy greens, and they want to devour that and kind of leave the grasses and stuff alone. That also has helped keep down on parasites, and so we don't have to do near as many treatments as we would if we were keeping them on pasture alone. And so even at the new property, they're going to have a lot of pasture land, but I've specifically gone in there and left big blocks of areas that are just overgrown thickets and weeds, just so they have that nice good browse that they can go after. So they'll still have some pasture land to roam around, but I'm not intending on them eating that. I'm actually going to leave the thickets there, and we'll probably end up cutting the actual pasture land a couple times a year to keep that down. And so that's been kind of interesting to see. The goats have also been a lot healthier because of that. Daisy produced significantly more milk. We were having issues with her not producing enough milk for both the kids. As soon as we put her on good food and good browse, she immediately started producing heavier quantities of milk to support both the kids. They also, as a general rule, the goats got healthier. The goats beforehand, they had the swollen bellies and real bony backsides, and that changed very, very quickly. Within a matter of a couple of days, they all tended to round it out a little bit more. They still, goats kind of have bony backsides anyways, but they tended to round out a little bit more, and they got that real healthy triangle shape that they're supposed to have. And so they ended up getting just a much better physical appearance because of it. Their coats were better, and they ended up just with an overall healthier demeanor, and they were a little bit more active too. And so I highly suggest bringing them back to what they want to do naturally, which is go after this browse. That was a lot better than when we tried to force them to eat grass. We did that as an experiment for a couple of days. They didn't like it. We had issues with them trying to escape out of the fence. So this has just been a much better method as far as feeding them. We no longer substitute grain in here. They only get grain as a treat. They eat solely what they can find out here browsing. So onto their structure and their perimeter fencing. We're currently using this Premier One fence. If you saw the last video, you know this is what we have. We've switched back to the solar charger. We found that if we used a good ground rod for that, we fixed the issue with the solar charger not giving us enough juice. And so we bought a new ground rod from Tractor Supply, drove it in, and gave it a good proper ground. This fence is only good enough to keep the goats in if they want to stay in. It has been good enough to keep dogs out, which has been really what we wanted it for. The goats, if you give them plenty of browse in here, they don't have any desire to get out. When we forced them to eat grass, they were getting out almost every day. When we keep them rotated around on good browse, they never escape. They've never tried. They just seem to naturally want to stay in here and eat what's available to them. So it's been significantly less of an issue. So I highly encourage you, again, that feeding method actually comes into their structure and what they're using here. They pounce around in here, they enjoy it, they play, but they don't try to escape. We don't have any issues with our goats getting out. We've never woken up with them being out as long as we've kept them rotated around on good browse. The only issue we had was when we put them up there at the top of the hill where the grass is at, and at that point in time they wanted out on a daily basis. You could go out there every hour and they'd be out, and it's because they didn't want to eat that. They wanted to eat especially the kudzu all around. Okay, so that's their fencing in a nutshell. I highly recommend the Premier One fencing. It actually has been very, very durable. It does get a little tangled sometimes when you're moving it. So again, I wish it was 50-foot sections instead of 100-foot sections. But otherwise, it's been a great product. Kind of changing my last review of it, the solar charger does work significantly better with a good ground rod. So Premier One really should rethink the grounding that they give with it. It just doesn't do anything. But now with a good ground rod, we got a lot more juice with the solar charger, and we're able to put that back on. Next thing is water. You know, there wasn't really a lot of information out there about how much water to do, so we ended up just buying a water trough, and we figured, okay, we'll have to replace this periodically, you know, every couple of days or so, fill it up. And what we found is we actually don't have to do anything with it, and we could about put out a 5-gallon bucket for all 4 goats, and they'd drink that, and that would be about all the water they'd need. They don't need much water. It's been really, really interesting to see that. I guess they get most of their water from the browse that they're going after. We let the rain, you know, we get about 56 inches of rain here a year, and on average, and that has kind of replaces the water and cleans out the trough. So we've come up here a couple times to give them fresh water, but other than that, we've never actually had to refill it. They've never actually even gotten close to running out of water. And so we just make sure that they have good fresh water in there and it's clean, but they don't even come close to running out of water. So if that helps you plan at all, you know, we have 4 goats, and we can't even measure how much water they're drinking in gallons because it's so minimal. They get most of their water, I guess, again, from the plants and what they're naturally digesting from any of the plant fodder they're eating. So keep that in mind with your goats. That water is not near as consequential as it would be with other animals. So the next thing was shelter. What did we want to do for shelter? Well, we have a temporary shelter here that we're using simply because we're moving to the new property. The permanent shelter is being built there. We didn't want to spend a bunch of time and money on infrastructure here. So that's been that's been kind of a headache. And the reason that's a headache is because the goats want to play on it. And it's actually lasted fine for the weather, but the goats jump on it, they tear out the stakes all the time, and they're actually the pain when it comes to the shelter. So if you were going to move them around on a permanent basis, building something like a pig ark would be perfect because they could climb on top of it and it wouldn't damage it, and they'd have a shelter to get out of the rain. But if you're like we're going to as a permanent pasture for them, pasture with a bunch of thickets, like I said, and in there they'll have the barn to come back to. We probably will eventually build some type of pig ark for them, so that way we can move them around the property and help them, and let them help us control the weeds. But for the most part, they'll be in that pasture. So the pig ark or the goat ark is not real high on the priority list. Last thing I really want to discuss is the medicine for the goats. And so a couple things. You obviously need to do your CDT. I think it's once a year is what they're saying now. But check your area, check with your vet. I'm not a vet, but CDT annually is what we're doing. CDT with a booster, with an annual booster, and to keep that down and make sure we're not getting tetanus and however you say the actual bacteria's name. But the other thing is worming. Worming is going to change a lot by area and by what you're allowing the goats to go after to eat. If they're eating on a cow pasture, they're going to have a lot more issues with worms than they will if they're eating browse like this. So the next time we do the worming, we're actually going to test them before and after and see what they're actually getting. Hey, Delilah. You're getting a little bit more friendly, but anyway, so we're gonna next time we do it, we're gonna have it tested before and after, and see what they say. The method that we're using is a 10-10 method. So basically 3 treatments, 10 days apart. So that way you interrupt the parasite's life cycle and interrupt the worm's life cycle. And so that's what we're going to end up doing with it. We're using ivermectin. We are using it injected ivermectin instead of using it orally. A lot of people seem to say that orally, that goats digest things differently and that it needs to be done orally. According to the drug manufacturers, that's not correct, and according to my veterinarian, that's not correct. that doesn't really make a lot of sense from the way that he understands goats metabolize. He's not a goat expert, so he didn't mention that to me, but he said that he would not do it that way. He would use it as an injectable. The other reason to use it as an injectable is because goats, if they metabolize it too quickly and you put it in their mouth, then all of a sudden you have issues with those parasites all releasing at once and all dying at once. And that in itself can be problematic if it's too fast, simply because it leaves all these open wounds inside their body if they have a significant parasite problem. And so without knowing how many parasites the goats have, you can have these worms or these parasites all releasing and dying, and then now you've got an open sore inside those internal to the goats, and they can actually bleed to death internally without you knowing about it. So that's part of the reason that you do the injection, to kind of slow down the process, apparently. But like I said, we're sticking to that method. We're gonna do injections. We might change it up next time after we get them tested and figure out exactly how it's working. But we'll post those results so y'all can see kind of what they're getting. 10-10-10 method, every 6 months with injected ivermectin, subcutaneous injected ivermectin. And then so the last thing is just making sure that you have bandages for when the goats get injured. That hasn't been near as big of an issue as we thought it would be with how much they like to play, but keeping some penicillin on hand is certainly wise for that, and the correct dosage. What my vet told me is that penicillin is very hard to overdose on penicillin, so always doing a little bit more or erring on the side of a little bit extra is preferable to having it too light. And then certainly, you know, any type of bandages you want to keep on hand to actually bandage wounds is certainly feasible as well. We have a lot of ticks here. I have not dealt with the goats getting ticks the way that the dogs do. This is a really heavy tick area, really heavy tick year, and we just haven't had any issues with them, and I'm not 100% certain why. My suspicion is because of the areas that they're browsing, and a lot of it having to do with the diet and allowing them to do what they want to do naturally. That's about the only thing I can think of, because other than that, everybody else here is having huge problems, and we're not. You know, the dogs always have ticks. Fraser, our German Shepherd over there, always has ticks on her. We're always constantly pulling them off, and so she has to stay on tick medicine. But the goats have been just fine, and we haven't found any on them, and just hasn't been an issue. So take that for what it's worth. As far as medical issues, that's really about the only things we've had to deal with so far. We will have to castrate milk dud here soon, and we'll do a video on the castration of that. We're electing to use the banding method as opposed to cutting them out. I've surgically removed them from calves before, never did it with a goat, so I didn't want to deal with that with the goats. I thought the banding's a little bit less painful for them, and it is a very clean and easy way to do it. So that's what we're gonna stick with the banding method for them. Okay, other than that, I think that's all, guys. The goats have been a lot of fun. We've really enjoyed learning about them. We'll continue posting updates as we kind of learn things more about the goats. You know, like I said, this is our first experience with them. So if y'all have anything, any insight, ways that you've done things that have been successful, by all means, let us know. I know that the ivermectin thing is going to rub a lot of people wrong. A lot of people swear that you have to give goats the injection orally. I haven't found, and if somebody has research that proves that, by all means, I'm willing to change my opinion on it, but I've looked, I haven't found any scientific data that supports that idea and that consensus. That's just kind of an old ideal of it, that I haven't found any research that backs it. In fact, I found the opposite. I found research that says the opposite is true, that it should be injected. The drug companies have lots of research on that. The government has lots of research on that they should be injected, and that feeding it to them orally is doing them a disservice. And so that's why we've elected to do it that way. So again, guys, I really appreciate you watching. If you disagree with any of those methods in here, by all means, let me know. We can certainly have a civil discussion about it. Post something down in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Share the video. If you know anybody that's wanting to get into goats or just started getting into goats, tag them in the video, guys. So hopefully this will help somebody get started a little bit with it and figure out what they need to be doing.